When you think of George Washington, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Probably the guy on the $1 bill, right? The stoic general, the flawless first president. He's this icon of perfection, a leader who seemed like he was just destined for greatness from day one. But you know, that legend hides a way more interesting and, honestly, a way more human story.
Because here's the thing. The Washington we all know wasn't born. He was built. And the foundation of his leadership, it wasn't this long string of amazing victories. No, it was actually a series of pretty humiliating defeats. So let's dive in and see how the man actually became the myth.
Long before he was General Washington, he was just a kid with huge ambitions, but frankly, not a lot of options. His whole world got turned upside down when he was only 11 years old. His father died suddenly, and that one event changed everything. It completely wiped out any chance of him getting a formal education in England, which was kind of the standard path for a young guy from his social class. He was basically forced to figure it out all on his own.
And that path? Well, it led him straight into the wilderness. With college totally off the table and his mom putting a stop to any ideas about the Royal Navy, a teenage George Washington found his first real career as a surveyor. And you know, it was a perfect fit. It scratched that itch for adventure, and it turned out to be his ticket into the world of business and society.
I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. At 16, he's out there trekking through the uncharted frontier, dealing with brutal weather, crazy terrain. This wasn't just some summer job. It was a total crash course in survival and pure self-reliance. He learned to read the land, and in doing that, he started to see its future, and maybe his own too.
And you can just see how these skills became the absolute bedrock of his character. Surveying, it demands insane precision. You make one tiny mistake and a whole land claim is worthless. The work itself built up this incredible physical toughness and this deep, deep sense of self-reliance. But the really crucial part, it gave him a personal, hands-on connection to the potential of the American continent. He wasn't just drawing lines on a map, he was mapping out a future.
So this reputation he built as a tough, skilled frontiersman, well, it naturally led to a military commission in the Virginia militia. He's just 21, totally eager for glory, but what he found in the first shots of the French and Indian War was, well, a complete and utter catalog of disasters.
His very first command was a total baptism by fire. It all goes wrong, like immediately. In late May, he leads an ambush on what he thought was a French scouting party. Turns out their leader was an envoy, a diplomat named Jumonville, who ends up getting killed after surrendering. Huge political mess. Then, just a few weeks later, the French hit back, surrounding Washington's crew in this shoddy, terribly placed fort he'd built called Fort Necessity. He was completely outmatched.
And if that wasn't bad enough, here's the kicker. The surrender document was in French, a language he couldn't read. It was poorly translated for him on the spot, and he ends up signing a document that was basically a confession to the assassination of a diplomat. This wasn't just a military loss, it was a propaganda nightmare that helped spark the global 7 Years' War.
This was his absolute lowest point. I mean, his reputation was in shreds. The Virginia regiment gets reorganized, and Washington's told he's going to be demoted from a colonel all the way down to a captain. And rather than take that humiliation, this proud, ambitious young man just quit. That was it. His military career was, for all intents and purposes, over.
But he just couldn't stay away. The very next year, the British send over a professional army led by General Edward Braddock to kick the French out of Ohio. And what does Washington do? He volunteers to serve as an unpaid aide. He literally swallowed his pride because he knew this was his one real chance to learn from the so-called best. This was the start of his real military education.
And what he saw was absolutely shocking. Braddock's super disciplined British army, marching in these perfect European lines, walked straight into a French and Indian ambush. It was a slaughter. The redcoats completely panicked and ran. But right in the middle of all that chaos, Washington was like a rock. He showed incredible coolness under fire, riding back and forth, organizing a retreat while the battle was just raging all around him. And get this, it's an almost unbelievable detail. During that fight, he had 2 different horses shot out from right under him, and when it was all over, he found 4 bullet holes straight through his coat. And yet, somehow, he didn't have a single scratch on him. This act of survival made him an absolute legend on the frontier. Some people, including a Native American chief who fought that day, actually believed he was being protected by some higher power.
But Washington, he took away a much more practical lesson. He saw with his own two eyes that the rigid, by-the-book tactics from Europe were basically suicidal in the dense forests of America. The French and their native allies, using cover and guerrilla-style fighting, had just wiped out a superior force, and that was a lesson he would never, ever forget.
So, what did he really learn from this brutal, hands-on education? Well, Fort Necessity taught him humility, right? It put a check on that reckless ambition. The Braddock disaster was a masterclass in logistics and, more importantly, in tactical adaptability, the exact kind of out-of-the-box thinking he'd later use to do things like cross the Delaware. And through all of it, he forged this unbreakable resolve, this ability to stare defeat in the face and just keep going, which would turn out to be the single most important quality for the commander of the Continental Army.
See, these weren't just some abstract life lessons. These were the very experiences that directly molded him into the patient, strategic, and impossibly resilient leader that a revolution would one day need.
The transformation was just profound. You can literally trace the steps. First, the total humiliation at Fort Necessity, which just destroyed his romantic, youthful ideas about war. Then the Braddock disaster gives him this priceless, real-world education in how to actually fight. So when the Continental Congress was looking for a commander in 1775, they weren't picking some guy who'd only known success. They chose the man who had failed, learned from it, and endured.
So in the end, the icon that we all know and recognize wasn't born with some kind of innate genius for leadership. No way. That ambitious, kind of rash young man had to be burned away. He was forged in the fire of his own mistakes, and what came out was a seasoned, realistic, and completely resilient commander, ready for the impossible job that was coming.
It really leaves us with a powerful question, doesn't it? We're so quick to celebrate victory and success as the only things that mark greatness. But maybe Washington's story shows us something completely different. What if true leadership isn't about avoiding failure at all costs, but about having the wisdom and the strength to learn from it?